talk about plain speaking. I mentioned this at the beginning of the first hour. I'd hoped to get to it in the first hour. I didn't, so I'm going to make that the basic topic of this hour. And it has to do with just saying right out loud what's going on. Donald Trump, for example, is a racist. Richard Wolff in today's Guardian. Not the economist, the op-ed writer, the commentator. He says, let's drop the euphemisms. Donald Trump is a racist president. He said, he starts out saying, a lot of people think that Trump is just crazy or there's, incoherence going on here. It's just like a random. He says, watching this pinball president ricochet around Europe, you could be forgiven for thinking there's no method to Donald Trump's madness. And then he goes through a list of things that Trump, NATO is a ripoff and Theresa May is no good, and then now NATO is very strong and Theresa May is wonderful, and et cetera, et cetera. And you go, what the hell is going on here? Well, actually, there is something that's very, very consistent. As Richard Wolff writes, immigration is where Trump's journey begins and ends, the message running all the way through this stick of rock, right? And I would add immigration and the role that race plays in that. Trump's comments while he's standing next to Theresa May about how Great Britain its character has changed, its culture has changed, and not for the better. What does he mean by that? People with darker skin are increasing their numbers relative to the white-skinned population or pale-skinned population of the UK and of Europe broadly, and a lot of them are immigrants. Richard Wolff goes on to say Trump has mused before about how good it would be to deport people without judges messing things up. He doesn't consider his own country's ample immigration laws to be actual laws that he respects. He said, this is the language and mentality of so many extreme right and neo-Nazi parties in Europe today, Richard Wolff is writing. He goes on to say this should not be a surprise, and it shouldn't be. This is the guy who back when President Obama was elected started and became the principal national spokesman for, and I believe as a consequence of, was given a regular Tuesday morning slot on Fox and Friends for years. I think it was 5 or 6 years that Trump was on every single week on Fox and Friends to talk about how America's first black president shouldn't be in the White House, should be removed from the White House because he was born in Kenya. The whole birtherism thing. Trump began with racism in his modern political incarnation. I mean, he began with racism back when he was a kid, when he was in Brooklyn, and his dad was a landlord, and Trump was involved with the group that if somebody came in and made an application to rent from Fred Trump, and they were black, they put the little letter C somewhere in the upper left-hand corner, I believe it was, or the upper right-hand corner of the application, and it was kind of inconspicuous. And when they saw the C, they knew, oh, it's a colored person. And of course, suddenly, the apartments were all sold out. That's where Trump started. His father was arrested in a Klan riot, and it wasn't because he was protesting the Klan. From there, he goes to becoming a wealthy businessman in New York. And when a woman is raped and left for dead in Central Park, turns out by a white guy who is a serial rapist, Trump accuses 5 black teenagers of it and whips up hysteria to the point that he's buying, I think it was a full-page ad. If it wasn't, it was huge. In any case, a large ad in the New York Times demanding the death penalty for the Central Park 5. Who were exonerated, and he continues to call them guilty. If you want to know who Trump is going after in his tweets, all you have to do is look at the color of the skin of the people he's attacking 9 times out of 10. NFL, he's going after black players. Black Lives Matter, he's going after. Members of Congress. Oh, let's find a black woman. That's a twofer. And go after Maxine Waters. I mean, this is not dog whistle. This is bullhorn. He launched his presidential campaign with this whole rant about how the rapists are coming from Mexico, which is an echo of reefer madness in the 1920s. We got to criminalize marijuana because when those black people smoke it, they can't stop raping white women. Right? These are these old racist tropes. What's Trump's second thing that he does in office? I mean, the first thing he does is he lets the coal companies dump more of their waste into the rivers. That's sure going to help the average working person poison their children with their drinking water. Second thing he does is he pushes through his Muslim ban. Oh, did you notice most of those Muslims he's banning have darker skin than, for example, Donald Trump does or I do? And now he's unleashed ICE, this deportation force, on anyone who even looks remotely Latino. And now they're going back through people who have become U.S. citizens, naturalized U.S. citizens, to see if they lied about anything, so they can remove their citizenship and deport them retroactively. And I guarantee you he's not starting with the Norwegians or the Germans or the Irish immigrants. I guarantee you. I don't have the proof, but I would bet anything. Which brings me to a piece written by one of the leading experts on the Holocaust and on genocide studies. He's a historian. He's a lecturer at the University of Virginia. His name is named Waitman Wade Bourne, B-E-O-R-N. And you can read his piece in today's Washington Post. And the headline is, "Parallels Lie in Authoritarianism, Racism, Ethnic Myths, and Dehumanizing Language, Not the Final Solution." And the argument that he's making in this article, and it's a really brilliant article, and I strongly encourage you to check it out in today's Washington Post, is that, yes, when people speak of the Holocaust in the United States, typically what we're talking about is the Holocaust, the so-called final solution, which began in 1941, the murder of the Jews, and the trade unionists, and the communists, and the gays, and the gypsies, and ultimately even some of the Catholics, but principally the murder of the Jews. But he says, take that out of the equation for the moment. And I realize that's difficult to do, particularly if you're Jewish. But there was more going on between 1933 and 1941. In fact, there was very little, killing of Jews going on outside of the work camps like Dachau. It was not a death camp. It was a labor camp. Sort of like privatized prisons, only, much more extreme. But anyhow, he said there's no reason that historical comparisons between what is going on right now in this country and around the world with this hard swing to the right and the Nazis, he says there's no reason that historical comparisons must immediately center on the final solution, the murder of Jews. The Nazis themselves did not begin with that solution in mind. He said genocides, and dictatorships for that matter, don't just spring into existence, they begin incrementally. First, authoritarianism. I alone can solve these problems. Then racism. Oh, it's the Mexican rapists. Then ethnic myths. These people are animals. And dehumanizing language. He said this is where Holocaust comparisons can and should be made. And I'm making them right now. The Nuremberg race laws. Now, these were the laws in Germany that said that if you had a certain percentage of Jewish blood that you couldn't be a German citizen any longer. The Nuremberg race laws were based on an earlier version employed in the colony of Germany in Southwest Africa called Namibia. Hitler himself looked to Roman antiquity, I'm quoting from the article in the Washington Post now, as a partial inspiration for his planned intentional starvation policies in Eastern Europe. He called the Spanish conquistador Cortés a moderate man. Cortés, of course, engaged in genocide in the northern part of South America. Adolf Hitler referred to Thomas Jefferson's Indian removal policies, which were genocidal, admiringly, and he called the Volga River our Mississippi. This is Adolf Hitler saying the Volga River is our Mississippi, where inferior races must be driven. Hitler further stated that, quote, natives of Eastern Europe should be looked upon as redskins. Right? America engaged in ethnic cleansing and massive genocide. We can too. Hitler admiringly commented that America, using racist guidelines, had, quote, established specific criteria for immigration in an attempt to maintain racial purity. And it was true. And it's what Trump is trying to bring us back to. So he says you don't have to begin in 1941 to find these parallels. In fact, it's important not to, but to look at the beginnings. How does this stuff begin? And then you ask, where does it go? Right? But how does it begin? So when I come back from the break, I'm going to go through some of the how is it beginning, again from this fellow's article in today's Washington Post. And to give credit where credit is due, the title is Parallels Lie in Authoritarianism, Racism, Ethnic Myths, and Dehumanizing Language, Not the Final Solution, by Waitman Wade Bourne in today's Washington Post. We'll be back.